Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Wills and Trusts 101, Planning for the Future, presented by Michelle Meza. Today's webinar is being recorded. My name is Wista Atkins and I am the Training and Development Coordinator for the Native Learning Center. Just a quick disclaimer before we get started, this webinar provides a summary of fundamental concepts, requirements, and/or procedures within the allotted 90 minutes. The material discussed does not illustrate all possible scenarios that could be applicable. If you look at the top of your screen, you'll see an icon of either a person with their hand raised or just a hand. With that icon, you can either raise hand, agree, disagree, or step away. Now your screen should look similar to this graphic here. To the bottom left, you will see a box that says Files. Here you will find today's presentation. Please feel free to download a copy for yourself. Simply click the item you would like to download, then click the arrow pointing downwards, and you'll be prompted to save or print the materials based on your device's permissions. The second box that states web links to houses today's survey, as well as any other links that are found throughout the presentation. Lastly, to the right of the screen, we have a chat box available. This is how you will communicate to the instructor and NLC staff. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to interact by using the chat box. Simply type your message and hit enter or click that up arrow icon button to submit. We encourage class participation, so please feel free to write in those questions or comments. Tech support issues should also be mentioned here. It is with a great pleasure that I introduce Michelle Meza.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. I would love to know where everyone is from. So in the chat, can you please put where you're from? I'd love to figure out where people are and just enjoy getting to know people here. Also, if you can hear me, if you could type a number 1 in the comments as well. Okay, we have Alaska, Washington, Michigan, El Paso, Texas, Minnesota, Arizona, Wisconsin, South Dakota, Virginia. Awesome. Wow, we've got folks from everywhere. A lot in Oklahoma, yes. Northern California, awesome. California, Nashville, okay. DC, Mexico, Maine. Wow, we've got a lot of people tuning in today. I'm so excited. I love to have a big group like this. It just makes it so fun and interactive. Like Lisa said, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments and I will try to see them. And Lisa, if you could just help me monitor that so I don't miss anyone, that would be great. Brianne is not able to hear anything.
Brianna, at the top of your screen, right next to the microphone, there should be not like the microphone, but a speaker right next to it. And if you click it, it should allow you to click to have access.
Southern AZ, Lakeport, California. Wow, this is so cool. Another Oklahoman. Go Oklahoma. All right. Brianne, can you hear us now? Does it work? Okay, we'll get started, guys. We have a lot to cover, and I want to allow time for questions and things at the end. So this webinar is about wills and trusts, and we'll discuss wills versus trusts, how to make sure your hard-earned money and assets go to your family, and how to protect your children and pets if something happens to you. Our objectives today are, of course, covering wills versus trusts, estate planning 101. So we'll talk about the basics here. And then we'll go into detail about how to specifically protect your children and pets. Just a little bit about me. I am Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Cherokee from Oklahoma. I currently reside in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So I see a couple Oklahomans here. Lots of Californians, I'm sure you know where Oklahoma is. We have kindred spirits out there. And of course, I'm sure lots of you have traveled to Oklahoma at some point in your careers or lives. Education and training. I have lots of certifications, but I am the CEO of Luxie Coaching and Consulting. I'm a certified mindset and business coach, also an emotional intelligence life coach. I received my MBA from the University of Phoenix, and I have a green belt in Lean Six Sigma, so that deals with streamlining operations. And of course, I'm a certified business process manager, so I help organizations and tribes and tribal organizations streamline their policies and procedures, just helping them set that up and set those systems and operations up. My professional experience, gosh, I've been in the business and academic industries for over 28 years. I'm also the former president of the American Indian Chamber of Commerce of Oklahoma. And I'm also a PPLSI associate. I help families get access to affordable legal solutions. And we offer coverage in 50 states. Specific experience related to finance and just this particular background. I didn't put it on here. I try to just keep it minimal, so it's not all about me, it's about we. But I have been a property manager for over 10 years. So I've dealt with tribal housing. I've managed tribal commercial and residential housing. So I've worked directly with tenants, with vendors, with tribes, intertribal relations, and things like that. So I will give you my perspective, of course, as it applies to tenants, as this series is related to that. Also, if you all have personal questions, feel free to include those in the comments as well. I'm also an advocate. I'm a literacy and generational wealth educator. I'm passionate about it. First generation college student and first generation generational wealth builder. So I have a lot to say about that topic. And I'm very passionate, very driven, and I just want to make sure everyone has access to the knowledge so they can have the power to move their families forward. All right, so let's get started. I love to start with statistics just to paint the picture for you. So this particular slide is statistics on wills. So it's crazy to me that with all of the technology and the access out there, that these statistics are where they are today. But it's one of those things that we think, oh, we'll put it off later, we'll do it tomorrow. So 2 out of 3 people do not have any type of estate planning document. And 40% say nothing would motivate them to get a will and won't bother until their life is in danger. And, I've definitely seen a rise post-COVID, just dealing with, I think COVID really woke everyone up. I know it did me. I did get COVID. It was at the very beginning when it was just strictly respiratory. And, even though I had these things in place, it really made me think, oh my gosh, I need to stay up to date on this, at least, twice a year or every time there's a change. So now I stay on top of that. And of course, in my tribal community at home, they've, in rural southeastern Oklahoma, we've lost a lot of community members and tribal members, especially elders, really people young and old through COVID. So COVID has really shook a lot of us and made us realize like, oh gosh, we have to get our affairs in order. So there has been, these statistics are actually current. They're actually from 2022. So they have gone down a little bit as far as, or gone up, I guess you could say, as far as people becoming more aware and actually taking action on making sure themselves and their families are protected. And overall, only 44% of Americans actually have a will. So the first statistic there, 2 out of 3, that's just any type of estate planning document. We'll go over the details later in this presentation. But as far as just your basic will, only 44% of us have a will. So 63% of younger generations are more likely to have an estate plan. Now, I have noticed that, with this up and coming generation, the millennials are getting older. They have access to of course, they grew up with technology and they have access to um, all the knowledge just right at their fingertips. And maybe some of you are millennials on this call, and I'm sure you can relate directly to this. But, I think different generations are more aware versus others. Just thinking about my parents, they were baby boomers. It just wasn't a priority. It's just one of those things to where, we'll go into the misconceptions here in a minute, but, they were completely just unaware. Like they were not motivated at all because they didn't think they had anything to pass down and to take for us to take over. So speaking of perceptions, so these are the top perceptions just in the industry and things that I've just talking to the communities and stuff. These are the things that people have actually told me, including my family members. I don't need it if I want everything to go to my kids. My family members will take my kids and or pets. I don't have anything. It's too expensive and takes too long. If any of you have either heard this statement or have said this statement, if you could drop a 2 in the comments, I just want to take a quick poll. And, I guess for me, over the last 5 years of just being out in the communities, the top misconception is people think that they have a lot of assets, or they have to have a lot of assets rather, or have a lot of wealth in order to have a will. And that is just not true. And we are definitely going to debunk that today and unpack that. Oh gosh, yeah, I see lots of 2s in the comments. So yes. So these are common statements, and gosh, my goal here is to not only educate and empower you all, but that you all take it back to your communities and your families and be an advocate of estate planning and making sure that your families are covered. Even if they don't have anything, even if your parents are living with you. I'll go into that here in a minute, but just making sure that just basic affairs are taken care of, like checking accounts. So let's get into the actual meat and potatoes of the first objective here. So the definition of a will is a legal document that expresses a person's wishes as to how their property is to be distributed after their death, and as to which person is to manage the property until its final distribution. And, just being a property manager and asset manager over the years, I've run into a lot of this because unfortunately, as a property manager, you never know what your day is going to look like. And, I know some of you are probably in housing and you've seen it too. And you deal with so many things, and just the main thing I see is, okay, who do I talk to? Who do I notify? Obviously, we have emergency contacts, but as far as their affairs and just getting their belongings and things like that, depending on which state you're in or even your reservation, there's certain processes that you have to follow. And oftentimes I've found it to be rather difficult when nobody has anything set up as far as any type of legal document or living will, or just some type of document that says, okay, I need to call, maybe not the emergency contact, but I need to call this other person because I actually wanted my belongings to go with them. A lot of these people, no matter what generation you're in, what age you are, you have things of sentimental value, things that you carry from your families, maybe certain pictures or books or anything that, is sentimental to you and your family. But what happens to it if something happens to you? And, that is the $1 million question. And that's the common question that people, end up asking each other. So let's talk about the types of wills. So there are 4 types of wills. The simple will is the most common, and it outlines how you'd like your assets to be handled and how and where they should be distributed. The second is a testamentary trust will, which places your assets into a trust for your beneficiaries to access after you pass. Then you have a joint will. This is most commonly used by couples who want to name each other as the sole beneficiaries, made by two or more people, but are actually separate wills for each person. Then you have a living will. So this specifies what happens to you in the time leading up to your death, includes how you'd like to be taken care of medically should you become unable to make decisions for yourself. And I know with COVID, during COVID, during that 2 years, a lot of administrators and healthcare agencies and advocates and insurance companies and families, they were all struggling to figure out, okay, 1 minute our family member or themselves individually were alert and coherent. And then all of a sudden, they become where they have to have a tube or, be put on a vent. And it's just really alarming, when I can't imagine being a healthcare professional and you have a patient there and you don't know their directives, you don't know next steps. The surgeon, the doctors, their hands are often tied. And a lot of people don't realize these things that go on behind the scenes. And just being an advocate and personally just talking with families and talking to people in the communities just to make sure that they're aware of this information. So at least they have the basic documents covered. And most of the time, these things are covered by certain options. And we'll talk about that later. But, it really isn't a long process just to get those documents, those advanced directives figured out, especially if there's hospice or there's critical care teams, or a lot of hospitals nowadays have those critical care teams in place. So where they jump in if they see a decline in the patient, and then they work with the families and the healthcare advocates and people like that to make sure at least something is figured out. So the medical staff is left to just, because I think, besides them taking an oath, they want to make sure that they deliver the best care for the patient. And especially, if it's you, or if you've ever been in that situation, you want to make sure that you can trust people, especially if you come in through the ER and you don't know them. You're taken to a hospital where nobody knows your medical history, and all of a sudden they're having to, save your life. You want to make sure that those things are on file, or at least accessible to your next of kin, to make sure that things are set up properly. So the next segment in this is the benefits of wills. So here are the benefits, and there's many, but I didn't want to overwhelm the presentation, so I just included the top benefits. To elect someone to handle your affairs after you pass, to ensure your assets are left to the people you choose, and allows you to control what happens with your assets, to protect your children if they are still minors at the time of your death, takes off the burden off your family, allows the state to stay out of your family and personal affairs. And I think, I see this a lot, it's none of us never want to put the burden on to our family, right? Onto ourselves. None of us ever have the intention, because we'll do it tomorrow, right? We'll think, oh, we are healthy, things are good today, but what about tomorrow? And so that's my goal today, is to make sure that everyone is thinking about tomorrow, not about the bad or what if something bad happens, just to make sure, am I and my family covered, to make sure that there is no burden that's accidentally put on the family. So should everyone have a will? And the answer is absolutely yes. Young and old. My kids have wills. I have a will. Why? So if you don't have a will upon your passing, it can result in things like state laws governing who gets your property and assets, uncertainty for your spouse and or children, a complicated process if you don't have a spouse or kids. And a lot of people don't realize, that misconception that we talked about earlier, you actually have or own more than you realize. Your car, your furniture, your personal benefits, your checking, savings accounts, settlements, pets, anything that you can think of that is related to your name or tied to your name, what happens to it? And, state laws it really depends. I just want to make a disclaimer. I failed to do that at the beginning. I am not an estate planning attorney. I'm not an attorney. So this isn't legal advice. However, I am certified to talk about this through the company I represent. But I just want you guys to just make sure that you find out the laws of the state that you live in, or the state that you have your affairs and assets in, and because that will supersede, uh, besides being on a reservation. I know there's, like in Oklahoma, we're just going back and forth, it seems, who's actually has jurisdiction, who supersedes it, things like that. But you want to make sure that if you have these documents in place, they have to honor these documents. They do have to be notarized. They do have to be drafted by attorneys. I'll talk about that later on in the presentation. But I just do want to make you guys aware the importance of knowing your state's laws surrounding property and assets, and what you should do and how you should be protected. And just to give you a little background, I'll give you 2 case studies with my personal experience. So my mom passed away in 2017. They were both Native. One didn't have a will, and my dad passed away last year, and he did have a will. Thankfully, he listened to me. My mom was, very adamant on, look, I live with you. I don't need all of that. Michelle, you handle all my stuff anyways. You're on my checking account, not as a joint checking, just as a person, I guess, a next of kin or whatever. But she thought in her eyes that it wouldn't be any issues. And so what happened with her is, we'll talk about the probate here in a little bit, but her stuff, there's some stuff that had come up, and it took me almost 5 years to deal with it because I had to go through probate, and it was a nightmare. It was very stressful. Now, did she mean to put me through that? Absolutely not. But in her eyes, and my lack of knowledge at the time, because back then I hadn't heard of the company I'm with, and I didn't know anything about it. Our family did just generationally didn't talk about things like that, didn't have anything set up. That just wasn't a priority to our family. And it just kind of continued. It just passed down, generation to generation like that. And then once, just dealing with all that, it made me become aware. And then I started educating myself. And then I started on I don't know, just a journey of just being passionate, and a journey of advocacy to make sure that everyone is protected and covered, and so that no one has to go through with what I had. And she didn't even have a car of her own, but it's just the fact that the other little things, it just took, they tried to help me responsible for things, and it just was a domino effect. Then you have my dad, who listened to me. Unfortunately, he got sick before he had the rest of the documents finalized by the attorney. However, he did go through those steps and filled out the questionnaires, and at least got those notarized. So the process in getting him that transitional care, hospice care, it was so much easier. And, I'm a single mom, and you can imagine, just going through having to work full time, having to raise kids during all that, and then having to deal with this. And, unfortunately, a lot of employers don't allow you to take care of those affairs when they come up, but then the courts, and they don't care either. They want you to take care of it now. So as you can see, just with those 2 case studies, the examples that I set on the difference of someone having a will and someone not having a will, an advance directive.
Michelle, just real quick, you've got a question from Brienne.
Oh, great.
She said, what happens once the will holder dies and the paperwork hasn't been finished?
Great question. And I figured I would get a question on that after I mentioned what happened to my dad. So thankfully, I happen to have, well, in Oklahoma, the old law used to be that they could basically write it in handwriting. and sign it, their wishes or whatever they need happen to for their end of life care. And as long as it was notarized, that would pass in the court systems. Now in Oklahoma, in the recent years, they have kind of changed those systems a little bit. But because of the company I'm with and my dad went through, he was already in that process. So it was, thankfully the judge allowed it to not, it just bypassed probate, because he happened to be in that process and got that notarized. So I would definitely advise you. I can give you more information about the company I'm with, to see what your options are as far as that. Or if you are already in that process, make sure you either talk to an estate planning attorney in your state or your tribe, whoever handles that, or the court. The court the court clerk, you go in there, depending on what state you're in. I don't know who handles those affairs, but just ask those questions and ask to make sure if you need that paperwork notarized. And so what happened with my dad, he sat on that paperwork, and it was just one of those things. He was, procrastinator. He was like notorious. He was like a master at it. And he sat on that paperwork that I gave him. But thankfully, I found a mobile notary, and I worked with her, and she was able to come to his apartment where he was staying at. And I was there, of course, and just to make sure that he was coherent enough and, was able to sign it. And so that's how we handled that. Now, the attorney in Oklahoma told me later that because of that paperwork was started with the attorneys, that he didn't necessarily had to have that paperwork notarized, but however, it made it a lot easier dealing with his medical side of things. So, that way, if anybody had to jump in and at the last minute, because with my mom, thankfully I didn't have anybody intervening, but with my dad, I absolutely had a sibling and family members at the last minute tried to take over and decide what was best for my dad after he was very clear, and I was his caretaker for the year prior to that. So, Brianne, did that answer your question? Awesome. Thank you. Great question. Yes. Yes. Any questions? Yeah. Please interrupt me so we can take care of it then. So people with the will are more likely to experience positive emotions, and I will stop here before I go deep into these statistics, is because, mental health, that's an issue. It's a public health issue. It's just an increasing issue. And we all are faced with different things every day, previous traumas, unhealed things, healed things, but setbacks and trials and just things that just hit us every day. And it weighs on our mental health. And the company I'm with, PPLSI, they did a year-long study with all of their members. They have almost over 1 million members. And they dove deep into those members with wills. And they asked them they partnered with a psychologist, and they asked them a series of questions related to mental health. And I found these statistics very interesting. So 40% felt peaceful when they had a will in place, 37% feel confident, and 26% feel empowered. And just being a single mom, it just seems like, a single parent in general, or maybe you're a grandparent and you're a guardian for your grandchildren or nieces and nephews, whatever the case, whatever situation you're in, just having things in place, it just takes the burden off of yourself. And I can definitely agree with all three of these emotions, because at first I felt empowered. I felt like, wow, I broke this generational cycle of the lack of knowledge, the lack of empowerment, the lack of just following through, that my family had experienced generationally. And then I felt confident. It just gave me another level of confidence, knowing really that I could sleep at night knowing, okay, I travel for work, or my oldest daughter's in college, she's 2 hours away. she travels, and the road in between her and I is just dangerous. And, that's always in the back of my head. But I feel more confident knowing that these things are in place. That way it's like it's just a peace of mind. And of course, absolutely, I feel peaceful. There's just a peace knowing that, that my affairs are taken care of. So my kids, if something were to happen, I know that they, instead of just dealing with grief alone is a challenge. And depending on the mental state of those people or that person, your family members, then you put having to deal with affairs in front of that. And it doesn't allow them to grieve properly. So just knowing that things are in place, that they don't have to worry about that. They know that, okay, here's where the location of the will is, which is on a hard drive. I give them a hard copy in a safe, things like that. That way they know. It's kind of like a fire drill, right? Hopefully you guys, your families have fire drills in case there's a fire in your house. Well, they know where the plan is. They know what happens next. They know who to call. Everything is there for them. So, do I have any questions about wills? I don't see any other questions. Well, somebody's typing. Okay, Nancy asks, what if you don't have children or family members you don't want to leave your estate to? That's a good question. And there's a lot of people in that situation. And again, I encourage you to really to go back to your state laws and check to see what happens. I know in Oklahoma, just dealing with my mom's affairs, even though she had me, as far as the state was concerned, she had nobody to leave her affairs to, and that automatically went to the state. Just basic things. They took control of it. Just dealing with Social Security. They were trying to just take over my mom's checking account. So things like that. So if you have anything of value, definitely it doesn't have to be a family member or children. It can be a designated person. So let's say that you have a trusted neighbor or you have a trusted friend or a coworker whom that that they will handle your affairs the proper way. That is the person you want to talk to and just ask them questions and see if they would be, willing to be the beneficiary or guardian of your estate or will. So hopefully, Nancy, did that answer your question? Okay, Megan. So our tribal IHS gives out 5 wish books. What is the recommendation on something like this versus a will or trust? Megan, I've heard of those things. I used to work for IHS years ago out in Arizona, and that was a tribal-owned clinic. I don't believe they were giving out those wish books. If you feel free to, if you would send it to me or just email me the information, my contact information will be at the end of this presentation. So if you will reach out to me, I can look at it and be able to answer your questions. Okay, Nancy, yes. Megan, is that good for you? 5 wishes. Okay, if you could send that to me, I'm not able to click on that for some reason. Okay, Brandy, I apologize, I was slightly late. I'm sure it's covered. But is a will used for a trust? I have heard wills are sometimes problematic involving money for those people included in the will, taxes and whatnot, and a trust helps everyone with that. Okay, so that is a loaded answer. So the wills, there are 4 types of wills. You should be able to download this presentation, Brandy. I think it's in the bottom left corner. That'll break down the 4 types of wills. It really depends on your state laws, the type of will that you use. And of course, it depends on what types of assets and who gets it and how much. That's where it can be problematic. But in most states, as long as you have either of those in place, it bypasses probate unless somebody wants to protest it. But I haven't seen them be successful with that because there was a hard a legal document in place. Trust or more, we're going to go into trust and you'll see the difference. But wills are the documents, and then trust really kind of covers the 5 whys or the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, and why. Catherine, is this process for getting a will for a child the same as getting one for an elder? For kiddos, it has to be through an attorney, notarized, etc. Yes, for everyone, it does have to go through an attorney and notarized. In most states, I believe that's the same process. I know with the company I'm with, PPLSI, we have the same process for every state. It goes through an attorney. You fill out a questionnaire, and now we have a mobile app to where you answer the questions. And that's what my daughter did. So my daughter, I believe she was 17 when she first filled it out. Of course, she had to update it, just because of the legal age thing, per our state law. But she filled out her own questionnaire. And of course, for my youngest daughter, she's 12, I filled it out for her and then sent it off to the attorneys. They received the questionnaire. They sent me back the actual legal documents for me to sign in front of a notary. Okay, Mindy, I think many people do not do this because, yes, so this has been the case. Honestly, I think it's about half and half, just speaking for my family and a lot of people I talk to, especially the elders in the community. They're on a fixed income, or people in the reservations, Southwest, North, the East. I see this a lot, and they just don't have access to funds. And that's what I love about PPLSI. I actually found it out about PPLSI through my employer. They offered employer benefits, and at the time I was going through a really, really bad divorce in a custody battle, and I couldn't drop $5,000 to $10,000 on a retainer. My HR manager told me about. I worked for my tribe at the time, and I can actually set up I'm actually qualified to set up groups with tribes, by the way, and in groups, but that's another day. But I went through my HR department, and they gave me the information. And the day I signed up, I was covered. And that was my first relief. And so for me, with the plans that my company offers, it's free. The wills are free. They're included. Versus if you go to an estate planning attorney, like for my mom, before I found out about PPLSI, I spent about $2,500 just to deal with probate. She had already passed. She didn't have a will. Now that would have cost me $5,000 for him, if she were to set up a will or trust and deal with probate. So yeah, it can get very expensive. And unfortunately, attorneys, they don't do payment plans. But that's kind of, why I become an advocate and why I'm so passionate about promoting the company I use, is because they have found a way to provide affordable legal coverage for everyone. And especially those people on the reservations who don't, it's just hard to get access to broadband, to internet, just traveling back and forth. I was a former instructor at a college in Tucson, Arizona. So I had a lot of my students who were from those 2 reservations, and, they struggle just to get transportation to a library, to get access to internet. So I understand just the challenges that our people face, and everyone faces now with inflation and the increasing prices and things like that. So yes, Mindy, very, very good. All right. So let's move on to trusts. So we covered what wills are, and now we're going to go into trust. So again, I want to start with statistics first. 33% of people have their end of life plans documented. Can you believe that? Especially after COVID, I would think this is recent. This is 2022 data. I was very alarmed when I saw this come out at the end of last year. I'm thinking, wow, but again, it just goes back to people assume they don't know the resources. They don't know what's out there, what is affordable. They think that they don't need it. They think a lot of people, actually, a lot of the elders I've talked to, especially in communities, tribal communities, a lot of tenants that I spoke to on a daily basis, they all told me like, well, the hospital takes care of that. And whoa, that was really shocking to me. And I was like, no, no, no. Of course if you come in and you don't have anyone there yet, of course their first priority is to save your life. But then what if you have to stay in there or be an event or be chosen? Like, what if it's against your beliefs, your tribal beliefs, or your family beliefs, or your religion, to take a blood transfusion or any of those things? A lot of people don't think about it, and therefore they end up, and that's why we're at where we're at, with 33% of people having their end of life plans documented. And it's really simple. A lot of states now, a lot of hospitals, if you, in most cases, yeah, it seems like you have to ask for it, but they do have advanced directives. Now, keep in mind, they're a little different than if you were to go to an attorney, because obviously whoever drafts them protects, they keep them in mind. And I want to be careful when I say that. I don't mean that they're out to get the patients. I'm just saying you want to make sure that if you're a patient and you don't really understand it, you just want to make sure that you have someone else go over those documents before you sign them, or an attorney. If you're coherent and you can make decisions on your own, but you're going to end up staying in the hospital due to surgery or just getting through an infection, you want to make sure that you reach out to a trusted family member or an attorney yourself, and just make sure that you have them reviewed. And a lot of these hospitals, the advocates are really good. The representatives are really good about, not forcing you to sign it. I know back in the 90s, before some laws were in place to protect patients and patients' rights and things like that, that was questionable. But nowadays, we do have more rights. We just have to know about them, and we have to empower ourselves and educate ourselves and our families to make sure that ourselves and our loved ones are taken care of and we understand what we sign. So 18.78% were trusts. 6.1% of people nominated a guardian for their young children. Now, that's, even though that trusts are becoming, especially in real estate, I'm sure that you guys have seen TikToks, if you're on TikTok or just throughout social media, there's the buzzwords about trust. Put your house in a trust, put this in a trust, put that in trust. Well, you would think with all the information out there, this statistic would actually be higher. But again, it goes back to people don't understand it and they don't know what to do with it. And then it becomes, they think it becomes complex. And again, it goes back to access and affordability. So what is a trust? The definition of a trust is a legal relationship in which the holder of a right gives it to another person or entity who must keep and use it solely for another's benefit. Now, there are 4 types of trusts. I know somebody was asking the difference earlier. So this is where I wanted to take some time and dive into these. So the most common is a living trust. It's created while you're still alive. And a lot of people put their houses in it or their large assets in it. And they make sure they have guardians. Especially COVID, I've seen a lot of changes with this particular trust become more popular, is because people are realizing, actually, I had a close friend of mine who spent a year in the hospital. He had underlying issues, can't get into that because of privacy rights, but I did ask permission for just to cover his story, and he gave me permission. But so he got COVID. And because of those underlying issues and the severity of his symptoms of COVID, it literally almost took him out several times. And so he lost so much weight, so much muscle mass. He could not walk on his own. So he literally had to just basically learn how to walk again, learn how to talk again. So he spent a year. And what happened to him is when he got out, of course, his apartment was gone. His things, who knows, his vehicle was left, obviously, because he called 911 while he was at his apartment. So nobody had his, like, everything was literally wiped out. All of his dad's things from his dad's funeral, his wake and things like that, his flag, because his dad was in the military. So things like that, like all that was gone. And of course, he had to work with the property management company and things like that. He did recover some of it, but had he had a living trust, those things would have been taken care of. That way, a guardian could have worked with that property manager to ensure that things were taken care of properly. The second type of trust is a testamentary trust. It's set up after death according to your last will on record. And that's kind of, my dad didn't have a trust, but it would have leaned into that. He wanted me to take care of that, honestly. A lot of this stuff was overwhelming to him because my mom, when they were married, she handled everything. And I don't see this come up too much, but on occasion it does. Revocable trust, that's the third. That's another popular one. Living trust, it bypasses probate for the transfer of assets after death. Now, someone had asked this question earlier. So this is where it really depends on the type of will, but it also depends on the type of trust. And again, you have to look at your assets. You have to take an inventory of everything that you have, who you want it to go to, how you want it to go to, who takes care of the balances, or if it's paid in full. Hopefully, you do have some assets that are paid in full, but you want to make sure that everything is laid out appropriately, and that way it avoids probate. The last type is irrevocable trust. It cannot be altered after it's created. Now, I haven't seen too much of this, I guess I want to say after the late 2000s. The irrevocable trust was done, prior. A lot of the baby boomers set this information up. They didn't want it touched. It just made sense for them and their assets. Now it's a little different because of the different things that we have access to now. Other people are looking into different types of trust. So again, these would be questions for your attorney. And you really, once they ask a series of questions, you provide what your wishes are, and then you guys can determine together the trust that's best for you and your family. So again, revocable means it can be changed during the grantor's lifetime, and irrevocable trust cannot be changed once created. So let's talk about the benefits of trust. Now, man, I could go on several pages, but again, I wanted to try to pick the most common, the best, the top benefits of trust. So the first and foremost, what is my favorite, is it bypasses probate. Having gone through that process, oh man, I would not wish anyone going through that process. It's just long. It's, our justice system is very, very outdated, and due to COVID, very, very backed up. So of course my mom passed before COVID, but had my dad been in that situation, I would still be dealing with this stuff just because they're backed up 1 to 2 years. Even the tribal courts are backed up, is what I'm finding out as I talk to people in different tribes. So probate is a legal process that is time consuming and very expensive. Again, it is so expensive to go through probate. So many fees, a filing fee for this document, if you have to redo it, or if it's wrong information, or they say it's wrong according to their records, never mind yours, then you have to get it redone, and it's just a long process. Sorry, Della. I know some of you are having issues, but again, I believe this webinar will be recorded, so hopefully you can go back. Again, my contact information, guys, will be it's at the end of this presentation, so make sure that you download the file at the bottom left, and that way, if you have any questions after this, you can go back and contact me. And I apologize, I'm battling a sinus infection, so that probably doesn't help with the clarity of my voice. I do apologize. So the second benefit is privacy. Helps protect your privacy and do not become public record. And I know certain states they protect your records, but some states are open record, and that's what I'm finding out. The more I deal with the more I help families and tenants just figure out and navigate this process, or maybe helping tenants with the home buying process, just educating them and working with their realtors and their mortgage people. They're I'm learning that a lot of things are now public record, and nobody has been notified about this. So just trust really add an extra layer of protection of privacy. And the third benefit, tax advantages. Some trusts allow for the transfer of assets out of the estate, which can reduce estate taxes and gift taxes depending on state laws. Now, those questions, of course, would be directed to your estate planning attorney, and your CPA. Your CPA would have better knowledge of that as it pertains, because they have to stay on top of, they have to have continuing education in order to keep their CPA license. And they're probably the first ones that I suggest going to as far as details on tax advantages. The next benefit is protecting assets from creditors. Man, I just remember dealing with my mom. She didn't have much debt, but boy, they were vicious, and they didn't waste any time. Like, I hadn't even, you know, my mom, rest in peace. I did not even, have the funeral yet before somehow they got my phone number and they were going after me because we had the same address, or they figured that they just, I don't know how they find out, but they figured out that I was her daughter, and they of course went after me. So transferring assets out of the estate can limit creditors' access to them and shelter them from judgments against you. So just make sure, like, little things like that, that's why it's so important to have an inventory. It's no different than home insurance or renter's insurance. Most of those agents ask for an inventory of your things, especially if there's a fire or water damage or things like that. They want to know what items you have and what to cover. So think of protecting your assets in a trust is knowing exactly what you have. And it's inventorying every single line item you can think of. The next benefit, control of assets. You can decide who receives your assets and when they will receive them after you pass. And I know for me, I'm actually in the process of setting up a trust myself. I just needed to move around some assets, get rid of some, add some. And before I wanted to make sure all of that is settled before I finish the process. But that's one of the things I'm looking at because of my children, and they're younger, and there's no other guardian that I'm leaving them to. I want to make sure that they're set up at the appropriate times. Obviously, if something happened now, my 12-year-old, I wouldn't want her to obviously she's entitled, how I set it up, to half of my assets, but obviously she wouldn't know what to do with them. So you got to figure out, you got to work with your attorney, and he or she can guide you on the timing, or if you want to set up as a portion of the cash, or if you sell an asset or they sell an asset and the portion of that cash goes to a scholarship portion of the trust. That's something to think about. Any type of whole insurance policies that you have, life insurance policies that accumulate cash after death. That's when you want to make sure that they're passed down or assigned to the appropriate people in the appropriate time. The next benefit is children as beneficiaries. Now, children can be used to name. It can be used to name your children as the beneficiaries of your life insurance policy. So I get a lot of questions on that, and that's why I wanted to make sure that I threw that up here. Because you can name your children as beneficiaries. Now, for me, I do have an additional person, a family member who I trust. She's an elder of mine, just to oversee, because again, my children are so young, their brains are still developing, their reasoning, their decision making. So especially in those difficult times, if they occur, um, I want to make sure that somebody's directing them appropriately, and not at the hands of anyone else besides someone I trust. And you can do different portions. Like for my dad, you know, I have one sibling who's living out of four, and I was his caregiver, and he wanted me to handle everything. And, and I, of course, it was his decision, but you get to choose. That's the great thing about setting all this up ahead of time is you get the freedom to choose what you want, where you want it, how it's directed, when it's directed, to whom it's directed. And that's why, of course, you want to be proactive versus scrambling around at the time of sickness. All right. Do we have any questions on trusts? It's like a few people are typing. Brian says, is there a limit to how many things can be put in one trust? Now, that would fall back under the state, but as far as to my knowledge, no. Again, it depends on tax advantages. That would be like if you have a lot of real estate, I would say there might be a limit as far as the level of coverage and protection. And again, those are questions you want to make sure. I love these questions, by the way. Thank you so much that you guys are thinking about this, because you definitely want to partner with your attorney and your CPA to make sure that, if you do choose a certain trust, that all of your assets are protected and are covered as far as tax advantages. I haven't ever seen anything. I have come across a couple of clients of mine who they were actually, it was a generational inheritance and something happened. And so the inheritance of their mother, because it was her mother's side, but something was set up in the trust previously, originally, that it would, something obviously that would happen to the mom, that her children would get it. And it was very well put together. There was no issues on that. And I think on one of my clients, the only issue they ran into with their particular state, I can't obviously disclose the state, but they had a lot of real estate. I mean, a lot. And so the attorneys thought it would be best, based on the laws and the coverage, to split those up into different types of trusts, just to make sure that that family is protected for future generations. So that's a good question. Shantae, financial professional and life insurance agent here. Yes, while minors can be named as beneficiaries, if there is a death claim, often the funds will not be paid to the children by life insurance companies because they are minors. We usually advise against that. It is better to just name the trust itself as a beneficiary. Yes, again, it does depend on state laws there too. And I do work with a lot of financial advisors and life insurance agents. So thank you for bringing that up. I try not to go into those details, Shantae, for that reason, because again, I am not an attorney. And those questions would have to be directed back to your attorney, because there are ways to go about how to direct those beneficiaries. But yes, obviously, that's why I mentioned for me, I had a guardian who's over the age of 18 who would oversee in the case that something would happen. And that's exactly what I did. The trust will be named as the beneficiary. And then, of course, once you guys, I encourage you guys to do some research into these different types of trusts, because there are several different ways that every trust is set up differently, and it requires different things. So as Shantae's mentioning, I hope I'm saying your name right, Shantae. It's a beautiful name. But as she's mentioned, like, there are certain placements that you have to put, like minors or the trust itself or the house itself or different assets. There's different types of ways that you can do it to be fully protected. And again, that's done through your attorney. But great disclaimer there. Thank you, Shante. All right, guys, we have about 30 minutes left. I want to make sure I allow additional time for to get through this presentation for more questions. So let's talk about estate planning 101. Estate planning involves more than just signing a will. It involves lifetime planning and testamentary planning. Lifetime planning is choosing decision makers to make health and or financial decisions on your behalf. Testamentary planning designates the individuals or charities who are to inherit your assets at death, and in what capacity appoints a guardian to care for your minor children and an executor to administer your estate if one is set up. And again, that goes in alignment with what Shante was mentioning here. So where do I start, right? That is the question that everyone asks. So I encourage you first to make a list. Make a list of everything you own. Do it in a notebook, a spreadsheet, Google Docs, wherever is a safe place that you can keep it updated. And every time there's a life change or an asset change or any type of change, life change, you want to make sure you go back to that list and make sure it's updated. August is National Will and Trust Month. And so I always do a presentation, talk to my clients, make sure that, ask them questions. Hey, has anything changed in the last year? But for me personally, I do it every time there's a change, an asset change, if I acquire or if I sell an asset. And I do it, if there's not a lot of changes throughout the year, then I do it every 6 months just to make sure that the guardian is knowledgeable, my kids are knowledgeable about the updates, and I make sure the documents are updated. Next, write your wishes on who gets what and how much if you have any cash. A lot of people, a lot of generations still do the unbanking where they don't use banks, they don't trust banks, whatever the reason. They just keep it at home, buried or under the mattress or in a shoebox. I mean, my grandma, she lived up until she was 94. She was part of the Indian removal, the Great Depression, and she kept all her money in a shoebox. And she made sure that she guarded that closet. Anytime us kids would go around, she would make sure that we stayed away from it. Third is talk to an estate planning attorney or get a prepaid legal plan. Wills and advance directives are included for free with your legal plan. Again, just reach out to me afterwards. I'll feel free to, I'd love to share more information with you. But again, this is just for knowledge, and I want to make sure that you guys have all the resources that you need to help yourselves, your families, and take it back to your communities. Mary has a question. Is there a good way to handle tribal lands through a BIA so that they are passed down to the family when there are no child heirs? Okay. I'm so glad you brought that up. I was kind of gauging who we had in the audience before I go into that. So thank you for asking that question. I'm actually dealing with this right now as we speak. So my family had an original allotment back in, the day of all that stuff that happened to our people here in Oklahoma. It just took one family member to be swindled out of the allotment. And so I have been working, actually, my mom worked tirelessly for 20 years to try to get it back. No luck. I've been very aggressive. Of course, I have the resources, and my attorneys are helping me get that back. So I am actually in that process. So I don't really have a clear answer for you. And this is here in Oklahoma. But I would encourage you. What I did is I went to the BIA. We actually have an office here locally in Oklahoma. And I reached out to them and asked, what the statutes are, because you have statute of limitations, obviously, not necessarily for tribal lands, but as far as the heirs and things like that. For me, there were no child heirs. And so I am I believe I'm the fourth generation trying to get this land. So I've secured almost all of it. And I just worked with my attorneys and the BIA directly. So I'm sorry that's not a clear answer, but hopefully that can give you some direction. But yeah, I would definitely start with them since all of that was handled through the BIA. Also, I do want to mention, so the records that I had to go back and pull, I had to do a survey. I had to pull up any type of records, deeds, titles, anything. I think I even had to go back to the Dawes rolls and go. I worked with my tribe through the lineage department to help me go back as far as I needed to, as far as my family tree, because obviously, with the removal, and my grandma lost a lot of things being removed as a child. So my mom basically had to start over. And with me, my mom didn't get very far because technology back then in the 90s, was limited. There were just now computers back then. So thankfully with technology, and here in Oklahoma, we do have a digital title agency. And so they helped me pull up the history and to help the BIA provide some type of history as far as our family. Oh, Megan, okay. I work in tribal land and have attended ICC training, and he talks about wills and things to transfer land to the heirs with the fraction. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's true. And again, we have such an overlap. What I've learned just dealing with my own family affairs, especially trying to get this tribal land allotment back, is there's just we have some laws that overlap, and we have some that just without a certain document, it's just kind of my hands are tied. So I'm having to do a lot of research, a lot of digging, a lot of just pulling up the treaties, the laws, anything that I can to help my attorneys really fight for me. My tribe has been very supportive, I will say, because thankfully they've had a lot of the records that my grandma didn't have. Thankfully, we had some family members who were awarded that allotment. There was some type of record in the archives. So thankfully that helped. And Matilda is asking, what is ICC training? But again, one of his stories, as long as the will is witness and ours. Yeah, Megan, that's what I was telling you earlier. It really depends on the state. It goes back to the state laws. Because for the longest time here in Oklahoma, that was fine. It literally could, like, I have some of my clients who their children didn't have any issues because there was a napkin from a convenience store. It literally had the stamp of the convenience store logo on it. And on the back was their own handwriting. And they had a sign, and they had a witness under it. And so depending on that court district and judge, they accepted it. And I see that happen a lot. Now, again, I'm not familiar with every individual state, but yes, Megan, absolutely. That still exists. And I just don't want people to think that this is a hard process, because it's not. And that is so funny. You have a story about Will on the back of a beer case. Exactly. Yeah. I love it. All right. So estate planning is one of the crucial elements of a comprehensive financial plan, but somehow is also the most overlooked component, with the majority of adults not having any form of estate planning document. Create a lasting legacy. Live for today and plan for tomorrow. So thankfully, if you have I know we have some financial advisors here in our audience. So thanks so much for joining. And we need to support each other, reach out to each other, you need a team of people behind you, not just your estate planning attorney, not just your prepaid legal plan, but you need a good team of people, of knowledgeable people who can help you. And I have a great financial advisor. All of them so far that I've worked with my clients they're just amazing. Number one, they have great training. That helps. But also they're knowledgeable, and a lot of these things kind of go in and are covered or at least overlapped with their products that they offer. So again, get you a good team of people. And for me, I have several types of products in place. by different companies. I don't just, put all my eggs in one basket. But that way I want to make sure at the end of the day, I want to make sure I'm covered. I want to make sure my children are covered. And as I teach in literacy and just advocacy classes, is you want to prepare for at least 3 generations. It'd be great. I mean, our goal, right, is 7 generations. We want to, considering all that's happened to the genocide of our people, we lost a lot. We lost a lot of time. A lot of things were hard for us. My generation, for me and my family, it starts with me. I'm literally having to start from scratch, and it's been so incredibly hard. It's literally taken me all of my adult life to get all these things in order. But what leaves me at peace at night is that even though it was hard for me, it's not going to be hard for my children and my grandchildren in futures, because now both of my children are so knowledgeable and they see my passion. And I hear them, especially my oldest, talking to her friends in college. Hey, I know that you've been in accidents on your way back and forth to Texas to home or wherever they live. Do you have a will? Do your parents have the paperwork in case you get stuck in the hospital here in Oklahoma and they're in Oregon? And, or, whatever the case, at least, knowledge is power. And if the least that we can do, let's say, you don't get all these affairs in order, but at least if you're knowledgeable and you're teaching the younger generations or just other generations in your family, your communities, you're doing a heck of a lot more than what was here for us 20, 30, 40 years ago. Okay, Megan says one of his stories is as long as the will is witnessed or notarized that he is considered legal. Oh, wait, that's the same. Okay. Sorry, I just want to make sure I got all the questions. All right, so we are nearing the end of this. So how to protect your children. And the reason why I covered this in pets individually is because a lot of people have questions about this. And again, we don't have time to go into this. And again, I'm not an attorney. So the nuts and bolts of these particular things that I'm going to discuss need to be individually discussed with your attorney. But a lot of these things are often missed by a lot of my clients. So I just want to make sure that I cover it. So most people assume that their children, minors, will be taken care of by a family member after someone passes. However, your will must be clear on what happens after death. It should include a kid's protection plan, naming legal guardians to raise your children. Be sure to include immediate and short-term care of your children so that the authorities never have to take your children out of your home and into the care of strangers. Include legal names and addresses of all involved, both the guardians and the children. Now, I know that our Native kids are protected under, the Indian Child Welfare Protection Act, but I know there's been some cases challenged just here in Oklahoma recently over the last 2 years that unfortunately they were removed and put into a non-Native home, which really shook one of our local Native communities here in Oklahoma, especially that particular tribe, because they do practice a lot of, the customs and the cultural ways and beliefs. And so it really just shook our communities there for a while. So again, there's a lot more to this kids protection plan, but I want to just make sure I at least cover it. So you can go research it. You can talk to an attorney about it, because there's lots more that you can include in that. But giving our time today, I just want to make sure I mention it. Next, provide written instructions to all the people who care for your children, and including who you exclude from being a guardian. So there are not any courtroom battles over care. So for me, I come from a domestic violence situation. So, of course, I had to have extra layers of protection through the courts. Of course, I'm working with my attorneys, or I have worked with them. I've already set this part up, but I did have to provide extra documents, my divorce decree, some records and things like that, just to back up, even though there are written, it's a very clear plan. I just wanted to make sure that whoever handles it knows exactly the entire picture instead of just part of it. The next is financial durable power of attorney. This document will let your family access your bank accounts, pay your bills, and make financial and legal decisions for you if you're hospitalized or deceased. So this little document right here really saved my dad and me. That whole situation. He had COPD, so that was just a long, horrible process. But he became incoherent long before he passed, and so there were lots of things undone. Of course, when you're dealing with acute care, long-term care, hospice, different organizations or agencies are involved. There are just things that come up, during the care. And had I not had this in place, my hands would have been tied. And I just remember the hospice director and the long-term care facility director just telling me, like, wow, I just wish more families knew about having this document in place, or just having their affairs in orders to make sure that these patients pass with the dignity that they deserve. And that really hit me hard. I'd heard this, of course, from stories from clients and different things over the years, just in the community, talking, doing presentations. But when it happens to your own family member, it really puts it in a different perspective. And that really opened my eyes. So I made sure that, I looked back on my documents and I did not have this. Somehow it was missed. The medical was in place, but not this actual document. And so I made sure that I updated it, got it in there with the rest of my documents. And so now I know that things are taken care of. The next is healthcare directive. It appoints the person you want to make healthcare decisions for you and tells your appointed person how you want things. Now, this particular document really helped me in the situation with my dad, where I had other family members and a sibling arguing with me, trying to show up when I wasn't there. I had to go take care of kids or work or whatever. But, with those things in place, they didn't stress out the medical team, so it didn't take the care away from my dad. But also, they're like, no, this is what's in place. Your dad signed it, or your, brother, whoever signed it. This is what we're following, and this is legal. I mean, this is what we have to work with. So that really changed the game for my dad's situation. How to protect your pets. Oh, our beloved pets. They are often our fur babies, right? They are family members, and we want to make sure they're protected too. So I had a situation recently in one of the communities I work with. Of course, both parents ended up. They were older, and they had COVID. They both passed back to back. They were actually in the hospital at the same time, and they passed one right after the other. Well, they were dog breeders, and there was no documents or paperwork stating what happened to these beloved animals. Some were their personal pets. Obviously, the rest were the breeding. They're certified breeders. That sounded great, but without anything in place, we had different agencies showing up wanting to take the property, and family members happened to be there, and it was just a really, really bad situation. So I do want to reiterate that it is important to have your pets protected as well. So most people assume that their pets will be taken care of by a family member or after someone passes. And these people obviously weren't sick, so they didn't plan on passing, but they didn't think about it. And so your will must be clear on what happens after death. So you want to include a pet clause in your last will and testament. Now, again, this is just basics. You need to go. It depends on your situation, your state laws. You need to go back to your attorneys. Pets are seen as a property under the law, and they are part of your estate, just like other property you own. Now, it's not the case in every state or certain reservations, but you want to make sure that you are knowledgeable and aware of what those laws actually are. You can use your will to leave them as a gift for someone. You can list the recipient as a beneficiary in your will as the guardian, the name of the pet, and the breed of pet. And so you want to make sure that you list individually for the guardians and the pets. Okay, so I do want to leave you with a resource. So a little bit more about PPLSI. Inspired by an accident, disruptive by design, a car crash led to the creation of what we know as PPLSI, which is now a leading legal and identity protection platform. We've been in business over 50 years, and we're protecting over 1 million families and businesses. And they were actually founded right here in Oklahoma, in Ada, Oklahoma, in Chickasaw County, Chickasaw Nation. So really excited to be local. I just love the company. Of course, it depends on per state as far as what they cover, but for the most part, we are in 50 states and we do cover families and businesses. So let's talk about the recap. So we touched on wills versus trust. We talked about estate planning 101, or estate planning for beginners, and protecting your children and pets. And then this is how you can reach me. Again, on the resource recommendation has information specifically about legal plans. And then my email is michelle@luxyconsulting.com. And that concludes our presentation. Does anybody have any questions?
I see somebody type in. We'll give them a second.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Melissa. I appreciate that.
I'm going to go ahead and launch the survey for everybody. The survey will help let Michelle know what everybody liked, what you would like to hear more about, or if you would like another webinar with more details, please let us know what you think. This feedback, like I said, really does help benefit Michelle and I to know what we can do to make the webinars better for everyone.
Shantae, I see your question. If you could email me and give me more information and where you're located, I can find the information out for you. Thank you so much, Grace. Oh, thank you so much, Sandy. I really appreciate that. That was my goal.
All right. Well, everyone is just typing. I'm just going to finish out real quick. And Michelle, if you want to stay on past 3:30, you're more than welcome to. Or if anybody has any questions, you're more than welcome to put them in the chat box and Michelle can answer them. Our next webinar. Our next webinar is going to be May 2nd, Business Idea Generation, presented by Mark Thompson, Executive Director of Indian Dispute Resolution Services. As always, registration is free, and this webinar will be at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, 12 p.m. Mountain, and 11 a.m. Pacific. As always, you can access our recordings on our website, www.nativelearningcenter.com, under the Cathedra tab, under recorded webinars. You will also be able to access this webinar, which will be uploaded by tomorrow. Please don't forget to check out our podcast called Hopathanga Native American Podcast. You can find us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Snapchat. Please don't forget to check your emails as well for any upcoming webinars. And once again, thank you everybody for joining us today and being able to ask all your wonderful questions. Thank you so much again, Michelle.
Thank you so much.
I'll go back to your, just in case if anybody wants her email, it is right here.
Shantae, okay. Michelle at luxyconsulting.com. I put it in the chat. You should be able to copy and paste it if that's easier for you guys. Also, don't forget at the bottom right, you can download this presentation as well. Well, thank you, Clifford. Thank you, Beverly. Yes, thank you, Shantae. Thank you, Nancy. Y'all have been so great. Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Matilda. I appreciate that. Oh, thank you, Colby. I appreciate that. Thanks so much. Yes, I try to make sure I share my personal experiences to give real life examples. Thank you. Elisa, I think someone asked about a certificate for attending. I don't know who that was.
Oh, okay, I see. Tiffany, if you would like to email me separately, I can certainly see what I can do. We don't typically give a certificate afterwards, but if you need it for something, I can certainly make one. So I will type my email for you.
Yeah, I think she already jumped off.
Okay, well I can find her email.
Okay, I think I'll jump off here if that's okay.
Yeah, you're all set, Michelle. Thank you so much again.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Have a good day.
You too.